Have you ever been on the highway and you're driving in really dense fog? So dense that you feel like it's right there at your windshield and you can't see beyond the front of your car. I've had that kind of fog where you had to pull over, didn't feel safe. Or maybe you're going 4 or 5 miles an hour and it feels risky. You really don't know what is there and you don't know when the fog is going to lift. That's a lot what it feels like right now. But you know what? The fog is going to lift. Welcome to the Retirement Answer Man Show. My name is Roger Whitney. I'm your host. And this is the show dedicated to helping you not just survive retirement, but to rock retirement, even when you're in fog as deep as this from a world perspective. It's been pretty crazy, as you can imagine, doing what I do. Obviously, all the responding to you on the show and in the Rock Retirement Club. And I have clients that I walk life with doing retirement or preparing to retire this year or in the next few years. And we've been having lots of conversations and talking about income floors and liquidity and where are the risks that we need to address and where are the opportunities maybe we need to take advantage of. And so it's been pretty much busy 7 days a week. So Nicole, she pointed out to me, and you'll hear her in the Q&A, last week's show was titled, it's our anniversary show of 6 years of the Retirement Answer Man show. And I was going to share 6 lessons from those 6 years. And I ended up doing a show that didn't talk about that at all. That's how busy we've been. No doubt with you too, right? So I figured, okay, let's start off the show sharing those 6 lessons. Because if we go back 6 years ago, from my journey perspective, I started the show as a personal exploration to sharpen my saw as an advisor. And I happened to have a decent number of clients that were at or near retirement. And so I decided just to focus the show just on that. In fact, the show was originally called Plan Well, Invest Wisely, pretty generic. And it wasn't in for a few months, I believe, until we decided to focus the show on one subject. And that began my journey of sharpening my saw on your journey into retirement. And it's built, obviously, I think I've done well in sharpening the saw on how I practice my craft of helping be the guide there, but it's exposed some lessons about this retirement journey that we don't hear talked enough about, especially in financial planning. And so I thought I'd share some of those. And all of these really come from talking with you and having conversations and email exchanges and interviews and exploring this subject over 6 years. So I want to thank you for that because you've helped change my life for the better. I couldn't have imagined my life that I have right now 6 years ago. So lesson number 1 over these 6 years is self-evident. It's much more about the money. I think we know it's much more about the money in retirement, but we're so obsessed about how do we make the money work, we sort of make it about the money. And financial planning, retirement planning is not a math problem. Now, there's a lot of math involved in the financial aspects, but even in the financial aspects, it's not a math problem in the sense that it cannot be solved because there's too much that we don't know. Think of a math equation. If the math equation is not complete, you can't solve the problem if you don't have all the pieces in the first place. And your life is so unknowable over 2, 3, 5, 10, 20, 30 years that it's unsolvable. And that's important, especially in retirement planning, to acknowledge that and accept that more than most people do. And obviously, it's a lot more about the personal things. So that's the first bit of wisdom. Number 2 is I've realized through talking with hundreds of people that the change from decades of work and saving and accumulating to retirement and decumulation or harvesting is much more complex than most of us give it credit for. We think of it, we're just quitting work and we got to figure out how to pay for our life. But there are a lot of other changes going on. There's social networks changing. There's marital relationships changing. There's purpose that needs to be had. There's fulfillment. There's the fear that comes without having the superpower of earning. There's dealing with mortality. There's dealing with all the different risks. There's cognitive, the acknowledgement of we only have a certain amount of time when we're going to be healthy to do things. It's a much more multi-dimensional change than we give it credit for. We focus on the money part, that lesson 1, but we just think, we'll be retired and we'll just travel a lot. And that's not usually how it works. There's a lot more going on there than we think. So that was my number 2 on my list. Number 3 is attitude is critical. And it sounds very simplistic, half full versus half empty. What does this make possible versus woe is me? The people that I have found that are happiest in retirement had a positive attitude. They were grateful for what they had, and they gained that from experience more than things. Whether it was in the retirement plan lives that we've done, because we've done those with very rich people and very modest people. We've had people that have quote unquote needs. I need $200,000 a year base, to people that lived very happily on $34,000 a year base. There was no difference in their happiness. In some instances, the more modest financially, the happier they are, because they learn to value things that are experiential rather than tied to things. We all have our own personal journey here. So attitude is really important. And that's a hard thing to handle right now in the midst of all this corona disruption and pandemic that we're dealing with. It's hard to be happy sometimes when people are dying and people are sick and services are overrun for a period of time. But there are people that are happy. There are people that can what does this make possible? What can I do next? And that's part of what we developed through the Agile process of always trying to be on our toes, to be proactive, even if we're dealing with sometimes crappy things. So that's lesson number 3. I guess that attitude, you can't let the circumstance determine your attitude. You have to let the attitude interpret the circumstance. Number 4, traditional financial planning and investment management as an industry is a bit broken. Everything grew up about sales and product distribution. And a good portion of financial planning that I've observed is well-intentioned, but too limited, because it really always comes back to the investment portfolio. And that's the way the industry grew up. And there's a lot of faux financial planning to lead to the product sale or the asset management sale. And there's a lot of well-intentioned financial planning that is just too limited, because it always brings it back to the investment portfolio rather than helping to think more multidimensionally and really walking with someone to figure out how do you get things accomplished. And that's one of my worries about some of the financial planning from the mass providers like a Vanguard or other firms. And I'm not saying this is bad, because they're CFP professionals. They're very holistic in their thinking, or at least training. But when you institutionalize that kind of planning in a firm where it always comes back to investment management at scale, there's less multidimensional thinking. A good example would just simply be tax planning. A lot of retirement planning is tax planning. But I guess my realization here is just that financial planning is evolving, and there are a new breed or evolved breed of advisors that are very multidimensional, that are addressing everything more deeply. But that's not the norm. And I think that's natural evolution of the industry. And that's one reason why we developed Agile Retirement Planning. We're trying to be part of the solution, not necessarily the answer, but a answer of how do we evolve our industry. So that's where that all evolved from. So that was number 4. Number 5, related to Agile Retirement Management, is little actions are critical. What can you do next? How do I do it? Some accountability and assistance in creating momentum. There's always something you can do to take advantage of an opportunity, to help mitigate a risk, and to overall improve the situation. And rather than identifying and trying to just find the white whale of the huge action that will solve everything, it's a journey. It's not a one-time problem to be solved. That's one reason why we stopped doing limited term planning engagements, is that you could set up the project and help figure out some solutions, but all that stuff gets deteriorated. All those decisions deteriorate fairly quickly, and then you got to re-up it. And to have true impact, you really have to have an iterative approach to continually find those little next actions, because those are always critical. And then the last one I'll share is that trust is critical in not just retirement, but everything. Like for me, my personal journey when I was starting this, and I remember when we changed the name of the show to the Retirement Answer Man, that felt really arrogant. Who am I to say I'm the Retirement Answer Man? There are a lot smarter people than me out there, but it's more of an aspirational of a challenge to try to live up to it and continue to evolve and grow and trusting and acting on it. And I think this is very much with retirement. We were talking about how do you have the courage to make the decision? Well, if you have a good attitude and you have faith and some trust that you're going to be okay, and you just have to lean into it and trust that the path is going to be revealed before you. And if you're paying attention, you're going to see it and you're going to make little missteps. But if you take lots of iterative action, you're going to be okay. I think trust is a big thing. I know it's something that I've learned through doing the show and dealing with my own internal struggles. And I think it's something that you'll have to come to some understanding on to trust that you're going to be okay and that your path will be revealed in this new phase of life. So those are my 6 lessons that I've learned over 6 years. If you want to share some of yours, email me at roger@rogerwhitney.com. I'd love to hear yours and maybe we can share them on the show. And with that, let's go chat with Nicole and answer some of your questions.
So Roger,
hey,
what
Nicole.
happened? What happened to the 6 things that you learned from 6 years on the podcast? I think we were supposed to talk about that last week.
Where were you last week? You were not here last week. Did you notice that the segment before I cleaned up my mess? I talked about it.
Oh, you did? Oh, okay. Good. Yeah. I was listening to it for 6 Shot Saturday and I thought,
This is what happens when you work 7 days a week, having 8 to 10 meetings a day, talking about the world and the coronavirus and
brain
retirement. Brain fried.
I think we're all a little bit there. I think I'm a little worried about us collectively. All these working from home parents trying to balance homeschool and then people in the grocery store and healthcare working overtime and it's just.
So how are you coping, by the way? Because you are getting ready for a medical procedure in a few months. How are you handling all that?
I am just trying to focus on taking things one day at a time. I feel like so much is changing that all you can do is just try to focus on the concrete information that you have at the moment and not that your thoughts let them run away with you. So,
well, that's one reason why I've been keeping you so busy at work.
Oh, well, good. Yes.
Keep your mind out. I'm doing this for you, totally for you.
Thank you so much. I mean, there's nothing we can really do about it, right? And one of our favorite clients or my favorite clients wrote into me and he was like, I've been reading some history because I feel like it gives me really good perspective on everything going on. And I was like, hey, me too. I just read a World War II book. And when you think about, having to stand in line to get rations of food and things like that. And fortunately, most of us have plenty of food. We have climate controlled houses.
It's just toilet paper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Napkins. I don't have napkins.
All right, so we have some questions today, right? And it's interesting, a lot of these are related to this week, obviously, and in the coming weeks to, this disruption, this worry.
Well, I guess we'll just do our best to answer with what we know right now, huh?
And I guess we should remind people we're answering questions all month and every week ongoing. So where can they ask a question from us?
You guys go to rogerwhitney.com/ask Roger. And you can submit your questions, bonus points for audio questions. We love to play your voices on the air. And our first question is from Pete on gold. He says, I've purchased gold via an ETF, but there's concern regarding counterparty risk. So I'm investigating buying physical gold. I was wondering if you had any recommendations as to where to buy it. A Forbes article from 2017 recommended Hard Asset Alliance. I wondered if you had any thoughts on this.
You always leave out the compliments at the end. Those are my favorite parts.
Thanks so much, and thanks for your podcast. Read all the compliments.
So GLD, which is the major gold ETF, is a way of quote unquote.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
What is counterparty?
I was just about to explain that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I'm getting ahead of you.
No, you're right, though. That's an important term or something to consider anyway. So, Nicole, GLD, which is the major ETF that gives you exposure to gold, does it it's a financial instrument. And theoretically, they're buying gold and they're getting you one-on-one exposure to gold, but you don't own the gold individually. And so what counterparty risk is if you buy something like, say, this ETF, they are using third parties to help them manage the buying and selling of gold or gold contracts with however they do it in the ETF. So you're relying on the makers of the ETF, GLD, and they're relying on their counterparties, the third parties that they're executing with. And most likely those third parties have third parties that are helping them. So it becomes this daisy chain. So counterparty risk is that risk of one of those dominoes of everybody depending on each other falling down, right? It's like a good example when we work with clients, their assets are held at one of our custodians, Charles Schwab or LPL or whomever, and they use contractors that they depend on. So if those contractors fall down, then one of those could fall down and then it just trickles back to us. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So it's like a dominoes. And so gold, if you want to have physical gold, now I'm no expert in gold. I'm not a user of gold. I don't own any gold personally. I own some silver. But if you want to buy physical gold, the way that works is there's the gold price that's published intraday and in the paper, spot price. And usually if you go to a dealer, you're going to pay spot plus the premium. And that premium is all over the place, depending on who you go to. So I don't know this hard asset alliance. I don't know anything about them, but you're basically going to buy the physical gold plus at spot price plus the premium. And you can go to shops. There are gold stores all around. They usually like to pop up right around now. You'll start to see those ads more when there's stress in the market. Where I have seen probably one of the most efficient ways is if you find a private seller that is trying to sell some of their gold. There are lots of people that own lots of gold, whether it's gold coins or bars. And if you happen to know of someone that's trying to sell some, you can arrange a private transaction where typically the spread between the spot price and how much they want to be compensated for it is a lot tighter. But let's talk about gold for a moment. Just as an investment vehicle, it tends to be a fear gauge historically. People run to gold when they're worried about systems because we have this history of the gold standard decades ago. So gold is theoretically a store of value because it's somewhat finite and it's a recognized instrument for exchange. So the idea would be that you buy gold, and then that is a preserver of your wealth that you can take anywhere in the world and convert back to currency if you wanted to. So if you think of the Holocaust or World War II, when they were fleeing Germany, you would take your gold, flee to England or the United States or wherever else. And now you had that gold and you could exchange it for the currency of your new home. And it's a way of transferring your wealth physically. That is essentially what the value of gold is the idea that you can do that. Depending on how much wealth you want to transfer, gold is really, really heavy.
I was going to say, so like if you purchase gold from, let's say, this hard asset alliance that he mentions, they physically give you gold?
They deliver the gold. I have
a piece of paper that says you own it.
I had someone I knew a long time ago who did this. Actually, it's a two-part story. It's actually I think it's sort of funny. So he had a ranch and he was stocking his ranch for his go home, his safe house, right? And so they bought a ton of physical gold and they were going to take delivery of it. And they went there with their pickup trucks, fairly wealthy person, so much gold that the pickup truck couldn't handle the gold. Gold is heavy. And so they had to go rent a industrial type of truck to get it to where they wanted to go.
Wow.
Another funny story, same guy, is, well, obviously you have gold, you better have guns, right? And this is Texas, big ranch. So they ordered a arsenal of weapons and ammunition and got all red flags on the ATF and had to have all these interviews, but I digress. So if you're thinking about gold, you do have to think about what the end game is with it. Is it that you transfer it back into your same currency, or are you thinking about going somewhere else? Because transferring it could be pretty difficult. Diamonds might be easier if that's really the objective. There are services that will allow you to buy gold, but have it held in Switzerland or all these other places. You introduce a little bit of counterparty risk because now you have to trust that your gold's actually there. Maybe you should go visit it every now and then and that you could actually get to it. But I'm not a big fan of gold, but that might be how you can go about getting it.
Our next question is an audio question from Brent.
I need to have here. That's a thumbs up for audio question. Okay. Let's hear from Brent.
Hi, Roger. Got a question for you. I just want to check to make sure my idea or my plans are 401k is a good idea. Back when China was starting to have problems with the virus, they stopped manufacturing or closed them all. and I decided that was a good time to get out of the market. Now that it's gotten down to 20,000, I put a third back into the market and was going to wait until I got to 18,000 to put another third, and then down to 16,000 to put another third in. Unless, of course, it starts going better, then I'd put more in more aggressively. Primarily, I'm waiting until we stop having this lockdown or lockout or stay safe, whatever the term they want to give it, basically become unemployed is done. Just curious if this is a good idea, or if maybe you have some other suggestions. What I'm afraid of is if I put all in there and the market continues to drop, and I would obviously miss the bottom. I don't mind missing the bottom a little bit, but I most certainly do not want to miss the upswing. Let me know. Thanks.
I think a lot of people are contemplating or doing what you're talking about, Brent. And I think the most impactful part of your question that I heard, Nicole, was I don't mind missing the bottom, but I most certainly don't want to miss the upswing. I don't know how you do that, because even in bear markets where we're nowhere near the bottom, there can be massive rallies of upswings. I mean, we've seen it here in the past month or two. We'll have 6-7% down. We'll have 10% up. We'll have a week of up and then back down. So I don't know how you can miss the bottom, but not miss the upswing. And I think the issue I have with the tactic is it's a circular decision tree that you just keep going through. There's no objective in executing it. You're going to drive yourself batty. You're going to start to put a little bit in, markets are going to go down, and it's going to be a shoulda, coulda, woulda. Markets are going to go up, you didn't put enough in, or you decide not to put money in, it's going to be a shoulda, coulda, woulda. And you can get whipsawed into trying to time it because you gave some levels of where the market would be, and that would be a decision point. So you started to form that. I don't know how you came to those levels, but the problem is you end up changing the game as you go along and not really accomplishing what you want. Within this show, we're not traders, obviously. And I'm assuming you're over 50 and on the approach to retirement in some way. What's the point of the money? I think a good way to find your answer is process, strategy, tactics. And this is a very tactical thing. And when we think of safety, we think of segmenting your money out in, we call it the pie cake, which is basically liquidity, security. And then as you go out the time horizon, you can embrace more ups and downs in terms of investment risk. If you do that in a thoughtful way, most of the time, you don't have to deal with any of these tactical baddie things that will likely not work out, because it's going to be driven more by emotion wrapped around some form of logic, but the emotion is going to be the driver. Now, if you're out of the market and you're wondering what to do, you've already got out of the market, one suggestion might be consider, if you believe that this too shall pass, it just may take longer, and you can have a belief on that and how long this all may take. Why don't you start a dollar cost averaging back into the market? That's systematic. So if you're totally out of the market, or you said you put a third in the market, well, why not just peg, okay, the next 6 months, the next 12 months, the next 24 months, I'm going to slowly get back into the market to the target allocation that I want, and then just stick to it. If the markets go up, you'll be happy you have some in, and you may feel a little bit bad if you have some out. If the markets go down, you're going to be happy that you didn't put it all in at once. You're not going to be a hero either direction, but I think that will help you not get into this emotional roller coaster that you really can't win from timing these types of things.
So you mentioned the pie cake, and we actually have a pie cake question from May. She wrote, many of us do not have a pension, but I hear from many of your listeners who talk about pie caking include a pension in their planning. What can you recommend to those without a pension to build some sort of fixed income source instead of the pension to draw from? I realize this should be done many years in advance of imminent retirement. Thanks.
On a side note, Nicole.
Yes.
Since you brought up food, or May brought up food, my wife informed me the other day when we were walking that during this corona disruption and quarantining in place, that anything we ate, we couldn't judge each other for.
Okay.
I don't know if she was doing that for my benefit or her benefit.
Do you usually judge each other for what you eat?
Maybe she was really just speaking to herself. I think she did bring
No, I get that though. I mean, there are some days I'm just like, you know what? I'm going to make cookies today.
Shauna made a cake like a week or two ago, and she's never made a cake that I can recall.
What kind?
I think it was just mix that we had. It was like chocolate, and she brought home the frosting. I ate the frosting. I'm not a big cake person. Some of the frosting. And then she brought home a cherry pie the other day too. So maybe she's talking to herself.
Hey, you got to find little cheer up things where you can, right?
I'm a chip and dip guy. That's my vice. Okay, May, let's talk about pie cakes. Hey, I use both of those. So let me explain what we mean by the pie cake. It's sort of a pet term for me that some people like and some people don't. Really what we're talking about is a version of bucketing. And if we think of an asset allocation, usually we get the pie chart, right? With the different colors, which represent different asset classes, stocks, bonds, international, and so forth. And so the idea of the pie cake is that we have different asset allocations, so different pie charts based on time segmentations. Because when you're in retirement, you have a debt. I created this the other day too, Nicole. You have a debt, and it's called an I owe me. You have a debt to yourself. And that debt is for each year of spending. So if you're going to spend $100,000 a year in retirement, as an example, and you're going to do that in 2021, well, you have a debt, an I owe me, a debt to yourself to have $100,000 to spend in 2021. And then you have another I owe me for the money that you need to spend in 2022. And so forth. You have a debt to yourself. And that is essentially asset liability matching. So with the pie cake, the concept is we need to have money available to fund that debt, that I owe me for each year in your retirement. And so what we do is we build liquidity as one pie chart of mainly cash. And then the next pie chart is typically internally, we use a bond ladder that has money funding the IOMEs every year that they're due. And then the next layer is a more normal core allocation. And then the layer above that would be a pie chart that is much more growth oriented. So we can manage the short-term risk of market volatility and the long-term risk of inflation. So that's what a pie chart is. And so that is something that you want to start creating as you're on the approach to landing in retirement. But to your question, if you don't have a pension, I think this is at least our best practice of how we think about managing cash flow in retirement and allocating assets. But another thing that you can do is you can actually buy a pension, because a pension is nothing really more than an annuity, really. And a lot of pension funds transfer it to an annuity company and buy an annuity. So you can buy an annuity that will pay you a set income for the rest of your life. You can buy one that starts immediately. You can buy one that starts in the future. And that's something that is appropriate for some people. And we've talked about that in our annuity series is you can buy an annuity that starts when you're 80 years old. So the income payment will grow and you'll still have some possible liquidity, but at 80 or whatever date you choose, it will turn income on or a pension in your later years of life. That's a viable option. So you can actually buy a pension and the numbers are pretty clear. And you can consider rental properties or things that throw off passive income. There's ways of doing that. Each one of these has its own considerations, risks, and opportunities that you need to navigate. But I think those are three good ones to consider as you're trying to navigate that. So hopefully that helps me. I'm hungry.
Time for you to go have some cake, pie, whatever's available in the kitchen.
Exactly.
Let's set a SMART sprint first.
On your marks, get set.
And we're off to set a little baby step that we can take in the next 7 days to maintain our sanity while we are quarantined in our house and work toward rocking retirement. I think that's going to be the theme for these SMART sprints, Nicole, for this
Staying
month.
sane in April.
Staying sane in April. So in the RRC, we had a meetup and we were talking about what does this make possible and looking for positive things that we can do while the newness of working from home or staying in your house most of the time is wearing off. Because I think it's starting to wear off for a few people.
Yeah.
A little bit.
I can see that.
In the club, what I promised to do over the next 7 days, I've always wanted to learn to tie knots, all those fancy knots.
Mm-hmm.
And someone suggested, I'm going to mispronounce it, like a bowline or bowline or something like that. Anyway, I'm going to learn how to tie it. So that's what I'm going to do over the next 7 days. I've committed to that.
Okay.
So your SMART sprint is, what is one little thing? It could be tying knots. It could be.
We're going to try sourdough starter at our house. We can't get yeast from the grocery store. So it'll be science experiment / making bread, which is good.
Perfect. And I will put a photo of my example of my knot and you can share what this piece of bread looks like. And you, my friend, I would love to know what you can do that you always wanted to sort of try, but you never got around to it. Well, now maybe is the time. What do you think, Nicole?
About what? Just in general?
We always don't know how to end the show. We just like to chat with you guys. And
what happened to sharing feedback? Are you out of feedback? I feel like the feedback actually has trickled off a little bit with everything else.
We've gotten reviews on iTunes, which we really appreciate, by the way. Honest reviews. And they're all positive, and it feels weird telling positive things about the show. But I'm glad that people like it. It's not for everybody. It's for our people, which I think is cool. So if you want to share some feedback, you can email me at we have that. Roger@rogerwhitney.com.
Yes,
I have a new email address. What we did was we've split up our advisory firm, Agile Retirement Management, which we just rebranded, agilерetirementmanagement.com, and the podcast and the RC to rogerwhitney.com. So we have new email addresses, lots of shuffling around so we can make things clear. So you can email me at rogerwhitney.com and let me know what you're going to do, or just let me know how you're handling all this. I'll definitely reply. With that, I hope you have a wonderful day. Hey, it's time for that all-important disclaimer. We so appreciate you listening to the show and love your questions and love the teaching that we're able to provide here. And actually, it helps us too. But remember, you're not our clients.
Not love it if you took advice from us on the show.
We would not love it if you took advice from us on the show. Realize it's helpful in education. Talk to your legal advisor, your tax advisor, or your financial advisor before you make any decisions.
We appreciate you joining us today for this episode of Retirement Answer Man. Be sure to visit rogerwhitney.com/answers to access the Retirement Answer Library with over 30 checklists to help you make the most of the only life you have. Remember, you have more power than you realize to create an amazing life starting today with Retirement Answer Man. The opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. All performance referenced is historical and no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. Have a wonderful day.